"Oh my God!" Sophie said and fell back against the sheets, exhausted. I haven't been f***ed like that since I was a little girl. I fell down next to her, panting as well, and laughed. "Sophie, that's terrible." I grabbed the pillow from beneath my head and hit her with it, and her breasts jiggled. "What can I say? You bring out the worst in me." She smiled beneath her messy hair, moist with sweat. "Ha, don't I know it?" I smiled back. "You'll pay for that. Later." Sophie threw the pillow back and it hit me in the face. We fell asleep, and when we woke up, the evening had turned night. "Damn," I said. "Now my sleep cycle's going to be all messed up." Sophie got out of bed and got dressed. She slipped on her watch and looked at its face. "Double damn, I'm going to be late for Lydia's party." She pulled her sweater over her head. "I've got to run, dear, but it's been smashing as always." She bent down to kiss me, and I kissed her on the lips. "Of course, always too busy for little old me," I said wistfully. "Sigh, what is a boy to do?" I put the back of my hand up against my forehead dramatically and laughed. She stuck out her tongue at me. "Bye, Tommy. Bye, Sophie." I got dressed and headed out to the bar. I was meeting Jack at 10. It had started to rain, and then night felt cold and alive, earlier than it was. It was when I passed by the alley on 73rd, next to that Chinese restaurant, the narrow one that somehow seemed extra dark and always freaked me out ever since I had started noticing it, that I heard a strange noise. It sounded like a mix between a yelp and a growl. I stopped in my tracks, not knowing whether to investigate or run. My choice was made for me, though. A woman stumbled out of the alley. The sight of her made my blood run cold. She was wearing a shredded tank top and jeans, both soaked in blood. She had blood in her hair, and on her face too. There was so much of it that it was pooling down by her feet. I wanted to call out to her, but my voice was stuck in my throat. She didn't need me to say anything, though. She was already making her way over to me. "Are you hurt?" I managed to whisper, but the look on her face answered that for me. It wasn't a look of pain or fear. It was a look of determination, of anger, of hatred. It was then that I began wondering if the blood was hers or someone else's. I panicked, fearing for my life. I should have run. I know that now. But hindsight is 20/20. I guess the adrenaline made me think that I was stronger than her. Plus, I thought to myself, what if she is hurt and needs help? Did I really want to walk away from someone who could be dying? She was only a few feet away from me when she fell to the ground. I should have asked her if she was okay. I should have said that I was going to get help. I should have ran. But I didn't. I did the opposite. I walked up to where she was sitting, and I crouched down next to her. That was where everything went wrong. Suddenly, the woman jumped up, and before I could move, she threw me to the ground. My vision turned starry as a searing white pain burst through my skull. I only partially saw her face as she bent towards me. I couldn't tell if it was just the blurriness, but were her teeth sharpened? Now is not the time to worry about people's dental hygiene, I reminded myself, trying to pull myself away from whoever this crazy bitch was. My head immediately disagreed, screaming in agony. The woman barked out a laugh above me. There was nothing else I could do, but slowly, pathetically, painfully, try to drag myself across the sidewalk and as far away as possible. With every shift of my body, she took a patronizing step towards me. Ah, shit. I finally hit the wall. She started bending down towards me again. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a low moan. I was powerless against whatever she was going to do. Without warning, her head jerked hard to my neck and ripped at the skin, leaving a huge gaping wound as her nails dragged down my chest. I don't remember if I physically screamed, but mentally I have never been louder. A few more bites, and I was on the verge of passing out. From the distance, somebody screamed, and all I could think in my fucked up state was, same. For some reason, the woman attacking me seemed off-put by this and got up, slinking back into the alley, tripping onto her hands and knees as she did. As red and blue flashes soon came into my quickly fading vision, I realized that somebody must have called the police or an ambulance. I vaguely noticed two people run over to with some sort of contraption, and they began to lift me up onto it. There, I whispered, trying to point to the alleyway, but my arm falling miserably to my side. What? One of the people said. The woman, I slurred out. They didn't seem to understand. It's all right, sir. We're going to take you to help. I kept trying to tell them who attacked me, but to no avail, as I passed out almost as soon as they rolled me into the ambulance. I woke up in a hospital bed, with no recollection of anything that had happened the night before. Very slowly, the pieces started to fill in. I tried to sit up, but there was so much pain everywhere that I immediately collapsed again. Rendered immobile, all I could do was wait for someone to come check in on me. What felt like forever later, I noticed two people standing outside my door. I didn't recognize them, but I could recognize that they seemed to be arguing over something. Eventually, the man ran his hands over his face before quietly stepping into my room. "Tommy," he said, "good to see you awake. I'm Dr. Engelman." "What?" I couldn't manage any more words than that. I truly was exhausted. "Ah, yes, there are quite a few things to tell you. Would you like the good news first, or the bad news?" "Good news," I croaked out through a parched mouth and cracked lips. I saw his eyebrows raise a fraction as he ticked off a box that read, "Cognizant and responsive." He looked back up at me and saw my eyes on his clipboard, which he turned so that I couldn't read it. "Well, Tommy, the good news is that we saved your life. You will recover all your motor functions and mostly lead a normal life." He stopped talking and looked at me. "Bad news?" I croaked, drinking some water. "Well, not sure exactly how bad it is, or if it is entirely bad. There is quite a bit of cosmetic scaring from the animal attack, and once we get you fit enough to leave of your own recognizance, or a family member comes to get you, we can discuss some options in that respect. Now, the odd news. The animal that attacked you seems to have infected with what seems to be some sort of benign form of rabies." I sat up suddenly, in shock. The doctor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Tommy, please, relax. I said it was benign, which means we believe it is harmless." I was still skeptical, and Engelman could see it, plain as day, on my face. "We treated you while you were unconscious for rabies. That's part of the muscle soreness you're feeling, and it seems to have paid off. You're a lot better off than you were when they brought you in here 2 weeks ago." I dropped my water cup and found my voice again. 2 weeks! It made my throat roar. "What the?" "Please tell me you're with me." Engelman gave me a sheepish look and explained. "You presented with swelling of the brain, and the bite was severely infected, and we thought it prudent to place you in a medically induced coma." I sat there and took in the news. I asked absent-mindedly for a phone to call Sophie, or my folks. I called Sophie first. "Tommy," she exclaimed, "I'm already on my way with your parents." They called them, then they called me as soon as you were awake. We chit-chatted about how I was feeling, and what all I couldn't remember. In less than 20 minutes, they all three burst into my room. It hurt to talk. Not much had changed since I was attacked. I was a missing person for a few days before everyone was sorted out. Then I asked Soph to close the door. "Listen, it wasn't an animal, it was a woman that bit me." They looked at me sideways. "Tommy," my mother cooed, "I think they would be able to recognize if it was a person." Soph sat her hand on my head. I shook it under her fingernails for a refreshing scratch. That simple action soothed me. Ever since waking up, it felt like my head was being split slowly in half. It felt like every muscle I had was stiff and sore. I had constantly felt on edge, and the attack from 2 weeks ago flashed through my mind. I could still see the woman's hunched back, the mania in her eyes, her jagged teeth. Wait, was it really a woman? My mother had a point. Maybe the doctors were right. Maybe it really was a rabid animal that had attacked me. My head pained me. My vision swam. I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I felt happy with Sophie there, scratching my head. "Everything's going to be all right, babe," she said. I closed my eyes. Thanks for coming here so quickly." "It's fine," Sophie said. "You should really be thanking Dr. Engelman and the other doctors here. They saved you. We were scared to death, Tommy. We thought we'd lost you. I spent about a week here, waiting by your side." "I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." "There's nothing to be sorry about, son," my father said. "None of this is your fault. We're just glad you survived. The others weren't so lucky." "The others?" I croaked. My mother slapped my father's arm and said something to him in a hushed whisper, but he continued. "There were a few other victims, others round the area who got attacked by the same animal. 10 people died that night, maybe more." I recalled the scream I had heard on the night of the incident. So it had been another victim. That's terrible. Holy shit, I said. Sophie told me more. Word is that the doctor and his team proposed the same coma treatment for the others. Unfortunately, it wasn't as effective for them. Apparently, you were all in critical conditions, and the treatment was a Hail Mary that may or may not have worked. That's not Dr. Engelman said, I stammered. She patted me on the head, ruffling my hair, comforting me. He was probably trying to lighten the load for you. You've been through a lot, babe. Don't worry about any of that, sweetie, my mother said soothingly. You're safe now, and that's all that matters. We don't have to worry about anything else. We were interrupted by someone knocking on the door. My father went to get it. It's Dr. Engelman, he said. They want to do a quick checkup to make sure you're all right. Hon Sof, we have to wait outside. As a team of doctors began to file inside, bearing all sorts of notes and equipment, my mother and girlfriend got up to leave. Sophie gave me a quick hug, embracing me in my bed. She pecked me on my right cheek, and then she said something into my ear in a subtle, hushed whisper. 3 words. 3 words that sent a chill crawling down my spine. Don't trust him. My parents and Sophie left, and Engelman came back into the room, a big grin across his face. You're feeling better, son. Quiet and ordeal you've been through. These are the sorts of things he said. He said they were conditionally releasing me, but wanted me to come back in a couple days for observation. I signed some forms. They gave me my things back. Engelman was there still grinning next to me the whole time, then finally said goodbye and disappeared into the labyrinthine green hallways of the hospital with his brown clipboard. Mom, Dad and Sophie were waiting for me at the exit. We all hugged, and Sophie kissed me. I love you, son, my dad said. I'm just glad you're all right. I love you too, Dad, I said. I just want to go home. Mom and Dad said goodbye and got into their white Chevy and drove away. Sophie and I got into her car and took off out into the night. It was dark outside, and the moon was bright and full and round and white. 2 weeks, I thought. It feels like months have passed. It felt like time had no meaning anymore. I scratched behind my ear and looked at the hairs on my arm. They seemed darker than I remembered somehow. Sophie said how crazy everything was and how she'd thought I was dead. She started to cry, and I watched her wipe away tears glistening in the moonlight with her index finger. Her left hand stayed on the steering wheel, but I could see she clutched it tightly. It was dark in the apartment. The only light was that of the full moon pouring in through the bay windows. I didn't turn on the lights. For some reason, I didn't feel like it. Just threw my things on the floor and kicked off my boots. Sophie reached for the light switch, but I grabbed her hand. Tommy, she said softly. Her cheeks were still wet from crying. What are you doing? Shh, I said, and kissed her. My lips were still dry. She kissed me back hard and then held me, and in the darkness, I couldn't quite tell, but it sounded like she was crying again. I missed you so much, she said. I put my hands on her and we kissed again. Her tongue was warm and soft in my mouth, and it tasted good. Like, really good. Have you ever had a steak that was so perfectly cooked that you had to resist from shoving the whole thing in your mouth? It was like that, only better. I couldn't help myself. I bit her tongue. Ow! Sophie screamed and jumped up. What the Mommy? I started apologizing profusely, tripping over my words as I took a gentle step towards her. Babe, I don't know what. I mean, I didn't. As I kept walking towards her, I could feel myself wanting to bite into her flesh again. Oh God, it was overwhelming. I spent my entire consciousness trying to push it back down my throat. I don't even remember how I got her to sit back down again, but somehow we were back on the couch together. Close. Very close. It was like I could smell her heartbeat. It was right there, in her throat. And I needed it down mine. Something animalistic came from deep inside me, and I started ripping apart her skin, trying to get whatever it was I needed from her. I hear her screams for a moment, and then suddenly, they stopped. I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. It just felt right, the taste of her skin and the texture of her blood, and finally, I knew why that woman attacked me like this. Oh, shit. I don't know why that thought snapped me out of my craze, but suddenly, I sat back and looked at what I had done. There was Sophie, or what was left of Sophie, covered in dark red from my couch to my kitchen. I had done that. Yet, I felt almost nothing. I knew, deep inside me, that I should be panicking, hyperventilating, running screaming out of my building, but that part was silenced by everything else in me. I calmly stood up and walked into my bathroom. It was only when I looked in the mirror that I began to feel. There was my reflection, except it looked nothing like me at all. Suddenly, I had a huge mange of hair all over my chin, some covering the rest of my face. As I internalized what I saw, I raised my hand to feel my face and saw that my hand, too, was suddenly covered in more hair than a dog's tail. Then sensed that none of that, should have happened, hit me all at once, and I began to freak out. I clawed my skin, wishing desperately to be who I was only last month, when Sophie and I were happy and together and alive and normal, and it took what felt like forever for me to calm down. I'm still panicked, I'm still lost, but I made myself sit up and look back in the mirror. It was too much change, too much hair. I know, it's f***ed to be sitting here worrying about a beard when my girlfriend's corpse is torn up in my living room. Nothing makes sense right now. Nothing has made sense since the night of the attack. I was going to turn myself in. I was. I don't want to live like this, knowing what I did, knowing that I liked it, but there's only one thing that stopped me. Just a minute ago, I got a call from Dr. Engelman. With a shaky hand, I slipped my phone out of my back pocket and picked it up, but before I could even say anything, he whispered, "Shh, shh, there's no time. I know what you just did. I know what you are. Don't worry, I'm coming. Just close all your blinds, all right? Don't let the moonlight in, and don't go outside. I'm coming." And with that, he hung up. So, what? I turn myself in, saying that I'm a werewolf now and be put in a mental hospital, or I wait here and hope that Dr. Engelman know what he's talking about. I could run away, but that only increases the risk that I'll hurt another person. To me, it seems that I only have an option. I can only hope it's the right one. Still, as I sit here waiting, Sophie's words keep playing in my mind, like she was still whispering them into my ear at this very second. Don't trust him.
That's the end of this story. If you found it engaging, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.